This video is going to serve a dual purpose. It's going to be a film study look at some of the Ravens' coverages against the Bengals, primarily focusing on the first three quarters of Sunday's 41-38 win in Cincinnati. Additional to that, I'll have some commentary about the Ravens, Zach Orr, John Harbaugh, whoever's decision it was or idea it was to bring in Dean Pease as a, quote, senior advisor, some of the implications of that. And then finally, I will display some Jayden Daniels film here and try to provide you a little bit of insight into the remarkable similarities that there are in terms of some of the offensive concepts that they run and some of the key players that Washington utilizes on offense to, at this point, lead the league in scoring. So we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the status of the Ravens defense that caused them to look outside the building and ask Dean Pease to come in at 75 years old. I think he hadn't been a defensive coordinator since 2021. 22, something like that. We've given up the most passing yards in the NFL. I'm talking about total, not with sacks subtracting. Over 300 per game, 15-20. 9 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Compared to last year, for the entirety of the season, we gave up 18 touchdowns with 18 interceptions, if I found my statistics right. Additional to that, we're allowing 8.1 yards per attempt. I think that's tied for 27th with 3 other teams. Now, we do have 16 sacks. That's 6 in the league. That's important. And additional to that, we are also the best in the league at run defense. I think we're allowing 60 yards per game. It's kind of like a bizarro world compared to 2023, where at times we had difficulty defending the run, and we were so incredible against the pass. In 2023, Mike McDonald's last year here, we gave up 5.9 yards per attempt, not with sacks subtracted, again. So really remarkable. I think that was tied for the best in the NFL, statistically probably within a 100th of a point in terms of being actually the best. And then compare that to this year, 8.1 yards per attempt, just a drastic difference. And it is fair to criticize Zach Orr and the defense and the staff that's out there. Let's do it this way. We're allowing 25 points per game this year. Last year we were number 1 in that regard, I think 16.8, 16.2, something like that. Let's say by some bizarro or other pathway, we are currently allowing 9 points less than we did last year, 7 or 8 points per game. Zach Orr would be getting all the credit. In this case, unfortunately, we're 3-2 as a team overall, and we're allowing significantly more points and more passing yards than we did last year. We needed a course correction. That's obvious. I'm going to break down some plays here from the Bengals game, like I said. I'm going to have small comments or critiques at times on some of the things that I see. Dean Pease and Zach Orr would see 1,000 times more than I would, trying to give you the insight that I know. Look, and there's times where the Bengals executed and Joe Burrow put the ball in a great spot and they made a great play, and it's almost indefensible at times. But the reality is the defensive staff was failing us. They were. There needed to be some type of, is that perspective for you, is that too soon to say that Zach Orr and those guys were failing us? Is it too harsh? Well, that's too bad, because this is a Super Bowl caliber roster. If we can get to 19, 20, 21 points per game allowed, we are one of the best teams in the league at the end of a 17-game regular season. Give ourselves a chance to not have to win every single week, basically avoid the wild card round, but it's going to be tough at this point with the Chiefs with a 5-0 record. It's really ridiculous by the NFL to only give one bye in each conference. But in any case, look, 25.2 points allowed per game. After you subtract sacks, we're at 280 in terms of pass yards allowed per game. Still number 1 in the NFL, or worst, I should say. We had to do something. We should be 4-1 at this point, and we're really close to being 2-3. Like I said, I'll give you some film breakdown of some plays against the Bengals. Some of my ideas are things that I notice. How often do we put Roquan at the line of scrimmage and he's dropping out? There is a such thing as muscle memory in terms of your pass drops that you practice every day, the distance at which you normally line up, and then how far you take your pass drop. So what I mean by that is your typical pass drop would emanate or begin from your pre-snap alignment with your feet here, and oftentimes you're going to be dropping at an angle, inside linebacker, or in this case dime linebacker on the other side doing the same thing. Whatever your drops are on a typical basis, there's muscle memory involved in that. My point is, by putting him at the line of scrimmage, we are putting him at a little bit more risk. Basically, he can be more wrong by lining up at the line of scrimmage. Now, the trade-off there is we're trying to determine protections. I still think that Roquan is too focused on quarterbacks at times, number one. and especially from this line of scrimmage alignment. We would call this a wrong read. So what we would say is you are in danger of not getting to your area. So you're in a wrong read. Your back's going to have to be turned, and you're going to read from inside out with your eyes. And that's what Roquan's doing right now. But there does come a point in this play and multiple plays where he turns and looks at the quarterback. You will say, and others will say, you have to look at the quarterback to try to get picks. Why don't we just try to stop the route and not allow the quarterback to get the route off? I'm not saying that we have to do it every single time, but when you look at so many of the passes that are completed over the middle or between the top of the numbers on one side of the field to the top of the numbers to the other, Roquan, Trenton Simpson, sometimes Kyle Hamilton as well, those guys are staring at the quarterback at exactly the wrong time. Moving forward here, this is second possession. It's going to be a wheel to the top side, and I'm a stickler for stance. Again, the idea about here is to be critical and to give you things that I think maybe Dean Pease has brought in to talk about and discuss. And I just don't see an NFL-level stance here. Now we're getting motion coming to us, so Brandon Stephens knows the ball's not going to be snapped. The ball, in fact, is snapped, and we're still not in a stance. To me, this is not NFL caliber defense from a pre-snap stance perspective, in my opinion. And then it shouldn't surprise you that Brandon Stephens, who's really fast, isn't able to get into his pedal quick enough. Now, it's an incompletion. I'm fine if people, particularly non-football coaching people or people who've never been involved in the game, say it's not a big deal because it's an incompletion. If Dean Pease is brought in to fix things, I think you've got to get down to the minutest detail to try to fix so that the players and coaches and everyone there knows that we're here to improve not just incrementally, but by leaps and bounds right now. And I think in order to do that, everything's got to be addressed, and he has got to walk in meeting rooms and on the field to question everything and basically put everyone on notice. What you're doing right now isn't good enough, and I'm here to help try to fix it. That's the reality of it, if you ask me. Is Dean Pease got the energy to do that at 75 years old? Is he the right person to come in and fix it? I don't know the answer to those two things, but nonetheless, I think that's the task. That's the reason why he's in the building already and will be involved in meeting rooms, game plans, and practice. Great play on the second possession here. Great blitz by us. I love that we're dropping out two of our outside linebackers. Kyle Van Noy, and I think it's Owe from the other side. They're lined up on the same side. Roquan is on an edge blitz here. So a very anomalous look by us in that we don't have an edge defender to this side. We're using Roquan. He's stabbing to the inside so we can blitz Marlon Humphrey off the edge. I'm fine with some of the craziness. We certainly got crazy last year, dropping out Owe, dropping out Van Noy in the middle of the field. It is a 3rd and 10. If we want to be unpredictable, sometimes we got to do those things. There's a time and place for it. I wonder or speculate that might be the reason why Dean Pease was brought in, to be a little bit more conservative at times, even though in that particular play that I just showed you, it worked. And sometimes the offense is just better than you on a particular snap. T. Higgins is 6'4". I think he's 225 pounds. You might have a little bit of the screen cut off up to the top side. My apologies. But you should generally see most of the play. It's man coverage by Stephens up there. His posture's being broken a little bit by contact. Higgins coming back to the ball. It's already thrown by Burrow. He gets the ball out quick. Again, this is 3rd possession. There's really not a whole lot you can do except make more physical contact with T. Higgins, who is bigger, stronger, larger frame than Brandon Stephens in the first place. I think sometimes you just got to understand that the offense does their job and does it well. And in this case, they got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase that are very talented. Nonetheless, I think we were often woefully unprepared for the situation and lacking awareness on Sunday. So this is still 3rd possession, going to be an example of a way. I think we're defending certain things very well. Under center run / play action concepts, we're all over. I think the announcer in this game was absolutely correct. I don't know why Joe Burrow isn't trying to get this ball out a little bit quicker. Brandon Stephens is hanging out over here. Now, you do have a right-handed quarterback who had to flip his hips to get the ball out here to Chase. You only need to gain 1 yard. There's a yard there, in my opinion. Yes, Stephens is going to be able to come down, collision, Chase as the ball arrives or just thereafter. This ball could be thrown. You have it's the 3rd time I've seen it this year, in fact, that dynamic where Chase is there on a 3rd and short. Burrow won't throw it out there. Ends up being a big sack. I give the end zone angle, I think. Tavius Robinson, fantastic job playing with physicality and getting there. The production that we're getting from our edge guys, I think, is pretty unique. that so many guys are having an impact at various times. Again, this is a 3rd and 1, third possession in the first half, obviously. Little play action. You got a right-handed quarterback who's opening to this side, and now he's looking out already before executing any type of handoff or mesh at all. Chooses not to throw it, ends up giving up a sack. We look great in the first half often, and then things kind of fall apart. Man-to-man, another situation. I think Brandon Stephens is right there, and Jamar Chase makes a catch after there's a lot of contact here from a defensive standpoint, if you ask me. It's a 2nd and 6 on the 4th possession. We're manning up down here with Humphrey, Hamilton on the tight end. I think we've got a back that's going to try to leak out of here late, and Eddie Jackson is responsible for that. Marcus Williams in the middle of the field, deep. It's not a running back, my apologies. It was a tight end who was helping out in pass pro. Eddie Jackson covered. I think we're in good coverage relationship. It's just a nice throw by Burrow. Great catch by Jamar Chase, who picked Sunday against the Ravens, unfortunately, to have one of his best games of the season. Same play, end zone angle. Like I said, 4th possession, 11 personnel. You can see a little root hog action here by the running back. And then tight coverage by Stephens on Chase here. Burrow is throwing the ball away from the leverage side defender, and Chase basically posts him up, comes back to get it. It's a nice catch. I think Stephens is there to challenge. There's a lot of plays that are like that with Brandon Stephens so far in 2024. He's in tight coverage. He's able to challenge, but nonetheless the catch is made. Another one kind of like that where there's a lot of contact. In this case, Chase doesn't make the catch. We are dropping out Van Noy. We did this a lot to Burrow the last 2 years when the ball was on the right hash and Chase or Higgins was down here as the backside X. Drop the outside linebacker to the boundary, try to get in that window, particularly on, this is a 3rd and 5 on the 4th possession. Like I said, I mean, the Bengals sideline isn't wrong that there's a lot of contact, but we're allowed to compete for the football. Jamar Chase isn't actually making contact with Wiggins, so that would be, I think, the largest point in terms of Wiggins initiating the contact, grabbing. Maybe he's actually not grabbing, but trying to grab on Chase. Certainly looks like there's a lot of contact to me. It's a rolled cover. It's a rolled cover 3 from a mug alignment. So we once again have Roquan up on the line, making it look like we might blitz the nickel defender to the field. We do. I would say we're basically dropping to a cover 3. Darius Washington from the boundary had rolled back to the middle of the field. Cover 3 with essentially a man call on the backside, Wiggins versus Chase. Only one lane for Burrow to really throw the football. And again, through 4 possessions, we look pretty good. Things went haywire, obviously, in the second quarter, and then the Bengals scored 4 consecutive times, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, before we got a couple of stops late. The interception by Marlon Humphrey, and then the sack by Nnamdi Madubuike that initiated a stop for us on the last possession in regulation. That's the problem right now, and I think that's one of the things that Pease is probably brought in to help out with, which is when things start to go bad, they go really bad. We're not able to stop. I do wonder about our mentality on defense if there is a shift to, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the description of Dean Pease's defense was bend but don't break. Even though there was times where we did force a lot of turnovers, the red zone defense, to my knowledge, 2015 with the Ravens on through, I think, 2019 with the Titans was very good. At worst, 11th in the league or better. We are currently allowing 67 or 66% touchdowns in the red zone with no turnovers forced at that time. It's a great catch by T. Higgins against Marlon Humphrey, obviously. It's a 1st and 10 on the 5th possession. Ball can be thrown to a 6'4" receiver on an outside leverage. Humphrey kind of loses balance for an instant, gets shrugged off by Higgins. There's a lot of contact there. Glad they let it go. Higgins makes a catch for 11 yards. But if we can get that number down, that red zone touchdown percentage down, and allow 2 possessions a game where we're allowing touchdowns, give up field goals, simplistically, from a mathematical standpoint, we should win games by 7 to 10 points instead of winning them by 3. Now, that math may not exactly work there. I might be off by a number by 1 point one way or the other, but hopefully you get the idea. Our red zone defense has got to improve. And in some cases, I think, especially late second quarter, which you're getting ready to see here in a little bit, we've got to not we've got to avoid giving up the big play. We've got to avoid giving up touchdowns like we did to Jamar Chase late in the second quarter. Absolutely changed the momentum. Harbaugh made it worse with the timeout with 45 seconds left or whatever. There's some times where, look, this is a sick throw by Burrow. We're going 3 deep, 3 under. I've seen people on social media kind of evaluate the coverages and stuff. It is difficult. 3 deep, 3 under will challenge you if you don't get there. As a defensive back, what I mean. We're dropping Roquan out of here in the middle of the field, dropping Ardarius Washington down, have another second level defender, basically our third second level defender doesn't have as much depth. It is a 2nd and 1. Burrow's able to get it to Chase, 18 yards. A lot of momentum, if you ask me, for Cincinnati that during that second quarter. They're able to get things accomplished. Again, we're bringing 5. We're running the pick stunt with Kyle Hamilton, unable to make it work here to kind of free up. I think it's Brent Urban. Burrow steps up on the move in front of Matabike, makes a throw to Chase. You have to give him credit for the throw there. Yes, Ardarius Washington was drawn out of there from a leverage standpoint by I think it's the tight end leaking out late. The Bengals do a lot of this sniffer stuff. Basically walked up the running back and the tight end out of 11 personnel to deal with potential blitzers. And what happens is Ardarius is here as one of the second-level defenders. He's first to the flats. He ends up getting widened up. Me personally, I think there are 25, 28 seconds left in the half, something like that. I would prefer to give up the tight end in the flats. Gesicki possibly still going to be a big gain, but that leads us into this. And I absolutely believe that one of the reasons Dean Pease is brought in is to coach the players up for situational awareness. 15 seconds left in the half, regardless of what the heck we're supposed to be doing down here. You as the the person in charge of the defense, have to take responsibility for it. I totally reject some of the things that Harbaugh says at times in post-game press conferences, in press situations during the week. It's about execution. It's about execution. That implies that, we're in the right call. We've just got to execute it. Yes, if Marlon Humphrey or Eddie Jackson gets some depth, we're able to deal with this over concept by, I think it's Iosivas, and this climb or post by Jamar Chase that ends up being the recipient of the long throw from Burrow, 41-yard touchdown. Totally flipped the momentum. You can't give that up. As a defense, as a person in charge of human beings, you have to take responsibility for that, even if at times it is not your responsibility. Some of you may not like that concept, and that's fine. I love Bear Bryant's quote about football. If things go right, you guys did a great job. If things go wrong, I messed up. It's my fault. And that, I think, oftentimes frees up players to recognize that their coach will take responsibility, even if it's not their fault. I think there's something to be said for that, whether you're in charge of a football team, whether you're in charge of people in a business setting, a classroom, whatever. It's your job as the head of the organization, head of the team, head of the offense, head of the defense, to be responsible ultimately. Too many times we are giving up yards, and it's multiple guys who don't play well in certain situations. It's not just Marlon Humphrey. It's not just Marcus Williams or Roquan Smith. It's basically everyone past the first level of the defense. So that has to improve. It has to improve immediately. Can it improve drastically? I'm not so sure, that we'll see a huge improvement this week against Washington. We need for that to happen because Jayden Daniels and those guys are absolutely rolling. 31 points per game. I'm going to show some of the third down plays that they run, how they try to stress the defense, and what the mobility of Jayden Daniels. We already know. The mobility of Lamar allows you to get things accomplished deeper into the play than you should because your quarterback should have been sacked. Serious threat. I will add this. And I don't know if this actually works, this comparison or this little bit of memory. This is an interception by JOK. A very similar concept to one that we run. I would call this snag smash. And it's the same exact motion and the same exact formation into the boundary. 3 into the boundary. You get running back into the flats. One of these guys, normally the receiver, on a little snag concept, and then the tight end running the smash or the corner route. Ravens run the exact same play into the boundary. Often they did it the opposite of the way I just drew that up. The tight end ran the snag, and then the wide receiver was running to the corner. But point being, snag smash is something we run a lot. So does Washington with Jayden Daniels. Really cool to see. Hopefully our defense is prepared for it. But the comparison I want to make is, remember when Dean Pease was the defense coordinator for Tennessee? Of course you remember. And came to Baltimore and beat us in the AFC playoffs. Well, he dealt with an athletic quarterback. We are now facing a supremely athletic quarterback this week. We're basically facing a mirror image of ourselves in some ways because of how athletic Jayden Daniels is, his ability to escape and get away from people, and then along with that, be able to throw the football in high leverage situations like this. It's a 3rd and 5. You're getting an out by the slot. I think it's McCaffrey up top. He's going against Newsome. Pretty good corner. Jayden Daniels is throwing the football early. Maybe he could have thrown the football slightly earlier. I think it could be a little bit more towards the sideline, but he gave McCaffrey a chance to catch it. And he does so for a 9-yard gain to convert against man defense with heavy pressure. That's what the Browns are known for. A couple of more third downs. The screen probably goes a little fuzzy here. My apologies for that. The resolution is kind of poor on this one. 21-yard completion to Zach Ertz, who's still hanging around. Smash in. We run this exact same concept often. The tight end is running the smash. You got the in concept. The number 2 receiver is running a post. We're trying to clear out that side of can play it against Lamar Jackson. If you're playing man-free and everybody's back is turned and running down the field and your 4-man rush doesn't get there, quarterback breaks contain, whether it's Lamar or Jayden Daniels, you're in trouble. This is a typical 3+1. I think that's Isaiah Simmons. Is the spy, essentially, or potential add-on rusher if the 3-man rush doesn't get there and or if the quarterback breaks contain. I think it's Pinnock there on the challenge. A little bit of a floater, don't get me wrong, by Daniels, but he's having an excellent season. Obviously, every third down isn't working. In fact, I was a little surprised at some of their third down stuff, how ineffective they were. But nonetheless, look, 31 points per game, 77% completion percentage. I think they're getting a lot of on-schedule, almost schemed-up pass plays for him. So these are going to be an issue if we stay in man-to-man. Pick, rub concepts. We've had difficulty with these exact type of plays. The outside receiver bringing his route to kind of stack himself and the defender that's guarding him on the inside slot defender. Out route by Zacchaeus, who Jayden Daniels looks to often, particularly on third down. I think this is his 3rd NFL team, but I could be wrong. Very effective player, particularly on third downs. I like his game. Am I saying that Washington's going to come in here and beat us? No, I'm saying this is a legitimate threat, and it might be the right week to bring in an experienced defensive mind, someone who's dealt with athletic quarterbacks before. In fact, the best athletic quarterback that there is and probably ever has been. I do want to talk about Pease from the standpoint of what I think he's there to do. Senior advisor, I think is the phrase. He'll have a role at practice. I think it's corrections, correctives. Some of the things that I mentioned earlier, stance issues, alignment issues, focusing on the quarterback too much when you're at the line of scrimmage and dropping out of there. I think there's a difference between lining up at depth, 4.5 to 5 yards deep, getting your pass drop, and then being able to eye or key the quarterback at a certain time versus being at the line of scrimmage where Roquan Smith is a lot to kind of force the pass pro element of the defense, of the O-line to do a particular pass pro so that we can exploit it with our blitz. So I understand that why we're doing that and understand the benefits of doing so. I'm explaining or trying to explain the drawbacks of it. I think it has made Roquan too focused on the quarterback at times, and in those situations, in my opinion, he can't be. Corrections is what I think Dean Pease is there to do. Notice small little things at a far greater detail than I'm able to point out, and then try to address them. Number 2, game planning. And then in-game awareness. Now, I don't know if he'll be at games or not, so that's an issue that I'll talk about here in a moment. But will the game plan be shifted or altered some? I don't know. I don't know that we can say, hey, Zach Orr's a more aggressive defensive coordinator than Mike McDonald. Zach Orr's more conservative. I think we can say that Dean Pease is more conservative, at least from the Dean Pease we recall with the Ravens through the Super Bowl run and a couple seasons thereafter. I do know that right now, Washington's offense is absolutely on fire. Our red zone defense, I think, is 25th in the NFL, and last year was second. I think red zone defense is a focus this week because we're going to try to limit big plays as best we can and then improve our red zone defense, cut down, hopefully subtract 6 to 7 points from that 25.2 points per game allowed from a simplistic standpoint, and then win some of these games a little bit more comfortably because of how effective and dominant our offense actually is at times. And finally, the last point that I'll make, this is both talking about Dean Pease during game planning sessions, meetings, and at games, if in fact he's going to be at games. I have not read or heard anything that he actually will be. The term senior advisor doesn't sound like a coach, so perhaps he will not be. I do want to mention the Las Vegas Raiders and talk about the Seattle Seahawks for a moment. Mike Macdonald brought in Leslie Frazier to be an associate head coach. Leslie Frazier, of course, played with the Bears, had 6 interceptions the year they won the Super Bowl, by the way, in the 80s. Probably the greatest defense ever. Also ended up being a defensive coordinator, longtime coach in the NFL. Mike Macdonald, who is the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, brought in an associate head coach, someone with a defensive mind to help him. Antonio Pierce, the Las Vegas Raiders. He has his former head coach, Tom Coughlin. He also has former defensive coordinator for the Ravens and head coach of the Bengals, Marvin Lewis, and a Super Bowl champion in both of those guys' cases. It's not a bad thing to bring in Dean Pease. Whether it actually was Zach Orr's idea or not, that's what we've read. That's what Zach Orr said. That's what Dean Pease said. That's what John Harbaugh said. Cool, that's what they said. It's also possible that prior to that phone call occurring, John Harbaugh and Zach Orr had a conversation as well. I don't really care. But my final point is Dean Pease can say this, whether it's in a game planning session or whether it's in the middle of a possession. He can say, when we saw this before, we did this to fix it. Because he's actually been involved in that process before. Harbaugh has as well, but not as the defensive coordinator. Not the person who calls the plays on defense. Not the person whose job it is to go to the defensive captain and or guys at each position group and fix things in between possessions. That is now Zach Orr's job. We were not doing that at all so far through 5 games. Dean Pease has been there and can immediately say, here's how we fix it. That's why the guys wear headsets. It doesn't mean that anyone is admitting Zach Orr can't do this job, either right now or in the future. The headset is there to allow you to communicate with people up top or multiple coaches who have their own opinion or their own input, and then as a group collectively fix something. It's almost like a Zoom, virtually. A group fix something together, funneled to the defensive coordinator who needs to communicate it to the players and or to the position coaches that can then go relay the message to the players on the sideline in games, because that's where we're struggling most. I think it's a huge asset to have. I really do. When you have someone who's been down a path before that you have not, Zach Orr has not been a defensive coordinator. He's not had to fix things at all 3 levels of the defense before. It's a shortcut. It's a cheat code, potentially. Think of it like this. If you're going to visit a new country, a foreign land where you don't speak the language, first of all, hopefully you've done the research, but second of all, you need a guide. You need someone who speaks the language. And right now, Zach Orr and the guys at the defensive staff trying to fix things in the middle of games, they don't speak the language. And Dean Pease can. I think he's there to game plan. I think he's there to fix things in practice. I think he's there to hopefully have an in-game role eventually, but I could be wrong on that. I haven't seen any word about it. So this is my film study video / commentary about the hiring or official hiring of Dean Pease. It sounds like these guys have been communicating before. I know we all had other names or ideas about who could possibly be brought in to be a senior advisor, associate coach, whatever the word is going to be. Rex Ryan, Bill Belichick, Nick Saban. Those last 2, actually all 3 of those probably quite unrealistic. Dean Pease, 75 years old, probably didn't have a whole lot else going on. And having coached Zach Orr before, having had an affinity for him, been involved with John Harbaugh, obviously, during our last Super Bowl, was quite likely to say yes, and they did. I'm glad they got it done. You guys let me know what you think of my commentary about that dynamic, that decision, and then also the film study piece that I talked about earlier, the things that I think Dean Pease would be there to probably have corrected already, and what his role could be during the games if, in fact, he is present on Sunday against Washington. Appreciate you guys' time. If you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this film study / commentary look with a little bit of preview mixed in of Jayden Daniels' film, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.